Hey, Sona girl. I hope this works. Okay, so put the camera on me. Make this authentic here. Okay, honey. Get your book. Okay, can you put the camera on me the entire time and don't make this about you? Okay, this is me. Thanks. This is the last chapter of Gone with the Wind. The front door was slightly ajar, and she trotted breathless into the hall and paused for a moment under the rainbow prisms of the chandelier. For all its brightness, the house was very still, not with the serene stillness of sleep, but with a watchful, tired silence that was faintly ominous. She saw a glance that Rhett was not in the parlor or the library, and her heart sank. Suppose he should be out with Belle, or wherever it was he spent the many evenings when he did not appear at the supper table. She had not bargained on this. She had started up the steps in search of him when he saw that the door of the dining room was closed. Her heart contracted a little with shame at the sight of that closed door, remembering the many nights of this last summer when Rhett had sat there alone, drinking until he was sodden, and Port came to urge him to bed. That had been her fault, but she'd change. Everything was going to be different from now on. But please, God, don't let him be too drunk tonight. If he's too drunk, he won't believe me, and he'll laugh at me, and that will break my heart. She quietly opened the dining room door a crack and peered in. He was seated before the table, slumped in his chair, and full of decanter, stood before him with the stupor in place, the glass unused. Thank God he was sober. She pulled open the door, holding herself back from the running to him. But when he looked up at her, something in his gaze stopped her dead on the threshold, stilled the words on her lips. He looked at her steadily with her dark eyes that were heavy with fatigue, and there was no leaping light in them. Though her hair was tumbling about her shoulders, her bosom heavily, breathlessly, and her hev- heaving breathlessly, and her skirts mud splattered to the knees. His face did not change with surprise or question, or his lips twist with mockery. He was sunken in his chair, his suit wrinkling untidily against his thickening waist, every line of him proclaiming the ruin of a fine body and the coarsening of a strong face. Drink and dissipation had done their work on the coin clean profile, and now it was no longer the head of a young pagan prince on a new minted gold, but a decadent, tired Caesar on copper, debased by long usage. He looked up at her as she stood there, hand on heart, looking quietly, almost in a kindly way, and that frightened her. Come and sit down, he said. She is dead. She nodded and advanced hesitantly toward him, uncertainty taking form in her mind at this new expression on his face. Without rising, he pushed back in a chair with his foot. She sank into it. She wished he had not spoken of Melanie so soon. She did not want to talk of her now, to not to relieve the agony of the last hour. There were all the rest of her life in which to speak of Melanie, but it seemed to her now, driven by a fierce desire to cry, I love you, that there was only this night, this hour, in which to let Rhett was to tell Rhett was what was on her mind. But there was something in his face that stopped her. She was suddenly ashamed to speak of love when Melanie was hardly cold. Will God rest her, he said heavily. She was the only completely kind person I ever knew. Oh, wretch, she cried, miserably for his words, brought up too vividly all the kind things Melanie ever had done for her. Why didn't you come in with me? It was dreadful, and I needed you so. I couldn't have borne it, he said simply for a moment. He was silent. Then he spoke with an effort and said softly, a very great lady. His somber gaze went past her, and in his eyes was the same look she had seen in the light of the flames the night Atlanta fell, when he told her he was going off with the retreating army, the surprise of a man who knows himself utterly yet discovers in himself unexpected loyalties and emotions, and feels a faint self ridicule at the discovery. His moody eyes went over his shoulder as though he saw Melanie silently passing through the room to the door. In the look of the farewell on their face there was no sorrow, no pain, only a speculative wonder at himself, only a poignant stirring of emotions dead since boyhood. And he said again, a very great lady. Scarlet shivered, and the glow went from her heart, the fine warmth, the splendor, which had sent her home on winged feet. She half grasped what was in Rhett's mind as he said farewell to the only person in the world he respected, and she was desolate again, with a terrible sense of loss. There was no longer personal. She could not wholly understand or analyze what he was feeling, but it seemed almost as if she too had been brushed by whispering skirts, touching her softly in a last caress. She was seeing through Rhett's eyes the passing, not of a woman, but a legend, the gentle, self-effacing, but still spend woman on whom the South had built his house and war, and in whose proud and loving arms it had returned in defeat. His eyes came back to her, and his voice changed. Now it was light and cool. So she's dead. That makes it nice for you, doesn't it? Oh, how can you say such things? She cried, stung, the quick tears coming to her eyes. You know how I loved her. No, I can't say I did. Most unexpected, and it's to your credit, considering your passion for white trash, that you could appreciate her at last. How can you talk so? Of course I appreciated her. You didn't. You didn't know her like I did. It isn't in you to understand her, how good she was. Indeed, perhaps not. She thought of everybody except herself. Why, her last words were about you. There was a flash of genuine feeling in his eyes as he turned to her. What did he say? Oh, not now, Rhett. Tell me. His voice was cool, but the hand he put on her wrist was hurt. She did not want to tell. This was not the way she had intended to lead up to the subject of her love, but his hand was urgent. She said, be kind to Captain Butler. He loves you so much. He stared at her and dropped her wrist. His eyelids went down, leaving his face a dark blank. Suddenly he rose, and going to the window, he drew the curtains and looked out intently as if there was something to see outside except blinding mist. Did she say anything else? He questioned, not turning his head. She asked me to take care of little Beau, and I said I would, like he was my own boy. What else? She said Ashley. She asked me to look after Ashley. I don't know why this is making me want to cry.
I have read that 4 times.
It makes me want to cry. She said Ashley. She asked me to look after Ashley too. He was silent for a moment, and then he laughed softly. It's convenient to have the first wife's permission, isn't it? What do you mean? He turned, and even in her confusion, She was surprised that there was no mockery in his face, nor was there any more interest in it than in the face of a man watching the last act of none too amusing. I think my meaning's plain enough, Miss Nellie is dead. You certainly have all the evidence you want to divorce me, and you haven't enough reputation left for a divorce to hurt you, and you haven't any religion left, so the church won't matter. Then Ashley and dreams come true with the blessings of Miss Melly. Divorce, she cried. No, no. Incoherent for a moment, she leaped to her feet and running to him caught his arm. Oh, you're all wrong, terribly wrong. I don't want a divorce. I. She stopped for a second to find the other words. He put his hand under her chin, quietly turned her face up to the light, and looked for an intent moment into her eyes. She looked up at him, her heart in her eyes, her lips quivering as she tried to speak, but she could marshal no words because she was trying to find in his face some answering emotions, some leaping light of hope, of joy. Surely he must know now, but the smooth, dark blankness which had baffled her so often was all that her frantic, searching eyes could find. He dropped her chin and turning walked back to his chair and sprawled tiredly again, his chin on his breast, his eyes looking up from her black brows in an impersonal, speculative way. She followed him back to his chair, her hands twisting, and stood before him. You are wrong, she began again, finding words. Rhett, tonight, when I knew, I ran every step of the way home to tell you. Oh, darling, you are tired, he said, still watching her. You'd better go to bed. But I must tell you, Scarlett, he said heavily, I don't want to hear anything. But you don't know what I'm going to say. My pet is written plainly on your face. Something someone has made you realize that the unfortunate Miss Wilt is too large a mouthful of Dead Sea fruit for even you to chew, and at that same something has suddenly set my charms before you in a new attractive light. He sighed slightly, and it's no use to talk about it. I'm going to pause right there because I'm really thirsty and see if anybody's come in the chat room.
Have you read that whole book?
No, just the last. I'm reading just the last chapter.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, that's real dedication.
Have a good day. I'm going to grab something to drink here, guys, and turn the camera around. See if I can figure this out here. Well, maybe not. Maybe I'll show you where we're at. Thanks, Chaotic. I'm having some technical difficulties with my phone. It's not wanting to play anything I'm wanting it to, and I think I've got too many programs downloaded on it. So I'm going to stop here for today and just show you the grounds of where we are. And tomorrow I'll be back to finish this chapter. Here, take this. Show them around. Must be showing them around here.
I did.
Okay. Yeah, showing them around here, not me. Maybe I'll sit under that tree here tomorrow. Hey, Anissa. If you want to rewind, I was reading an excerpt from Gone with the Wind. Um, I'll come back tomorrow with better camera crew. Huh? Yeah, I'm in heels. That's what I wanted you to do so I could get myself together. Would you like to do that? That's what a camera